If you like to read, and let's face it, who doesn't like to read, right? Then you probably recognize this building on the corner of Congress Street and East Corydon Street. It's the old Carnegie Public Library, and today we're going to learn the history of this library as you join us for Coffee with a Curator. The Carnegie Public Library was an outgrowth of two older libraries, which were combined in 1901. The first of these was founded in 1879 as a free reading room. A free reading room was pretty much exactly that. It was located on the corner of Main Street and Congress Street. A building was built large enough to have a coffee shop on the first floor, and the profits from that coffee shop supported the reading room upstairs. Books were gathered and a few other books were purchased during the years until the number reached about 3,000 volumes. But there was never enough money to run it, and this library did not keep pace with the growth of the city. And right around that time, another small school library was formed. Eventually, it had about 7,000 books and was open to the public, but it was never enough for the growing population of the new city. By the end of the 19th century, it was apparent that a new library was needed. The city was growing at an amazing pace, and the free reading room and the school library were just not big enough. And then Andrew Carnegie entered the picture. Andrew Carnegie was a Scottish-American businessman and philanthropist from the Pittsburgh area who had made his money in steel. Andrew Carnegie was among the wealthiest and most famous industrialists of his day. He made a fortune during his lifetime and gave almost all of it away for the good of mankind. He once said, "A man who dies rich dies disgraced." One of the best examples of Andrew Carnegie's philanthropy was the founding of 2,500 libraries in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And of these, over 1,600 were built in the United States, including the Carnegie Public Library in Bradford. Knowing of Carnegie's generosity towards public libraries, he was approached by a Bradford oil man named Thomas McCrae early in the year 1900 to help fund a library in the city of Bradford. Carnegie had never been to Bradford, and there's no indication that he ever did come to Bradford. But in February 8th of 1900, the city received a letter from Andrew Carnegie saying that he would donate $25,000 for a public library in Bradford. There were two conditions to his offer, however. The first one is that the city must provide a suitable site for a library. And this was going to be easy because in 1894, that first city hall on this very site had burned, and the lot was vacant and waiting for a new building. The second condition was that the city must provide $3,000 on an annual basis to help support the library. Carnegie himself would give no further money for the library, only for its construction and initial setup. Needless to say, the city was thrilled with the offer and lost no time in agreeing to Andrew Carnegie's conditions. The Board of Trade, now known as the Bradford Chamber of Commerce, wrote, "We heartily endorse the movement and pledge the earnest efforts of the board to assist in securing this great public benefit. And in furtherance of this object, we recommend that the city donate the old city building lot for a site for the new library building." Following the construction of the new building, the Bradford Library Association, which ran the free reading room, and the city school district would turn over its books, library furniture, and all revenue that had been derived from library tax and create a unified board of trustees. Things moved rapidly along after that. Green and Wicks of Buffalo were chosen as the architects, and William Hanley was chosen as the builder. A little over a year later, the new Carnegie Library was finished, and its dedication was held July 1st of 1901. Over 1,000 people attended the opening. Dedication ceremonies were held at the Baptist Church across the street. The mayor, J.C. Greenwald, gave a brief speech, which was much appreciated because the heat that day was very oppressive. There was an orchestra and various singers, and after the dedication ceremony, the building was open for public inspection. The layout of the library in 1901 was a little different than you might remember. At the head of the stairway leading into the new building was a foyer containing the librarian's office. The children's reading room is on the right and the reference library at the left. The next few pictures will give you an idea of what the inside of that 1901 library looked like. This is the area at the top of the steps. Now, the room on the right, where you can see a man reading at a table, was the child's section when I was a kid, and I often stopped in there to get books. Here is an up-close photograph of that room on the right, with the man reading at the table. And those newspapers on the right? Now remember, this is a free library. Over the door it says free to the people, which means you didn't have to pay a fee to be able to read the papers. And a lot of people would come in here to do that very thing. Years ago, I was giving a walking tour to a group of students from St. Bernard's School, which was down the street, and I asked the kids what that meant, free to the people over the door. At that time, remember, it was a restaurant and no longer a public library. One little boy piped up, "It means all the food is free." No, but boy, wouldn't that be great? Now, we believe this possibly was the law library, and those overhead pipes indicate that this might have been located down in the basement. We're not completely sure what this room was used for. There's windows, so it's probably on the second story, and probably was some sort of reference room where children certainly were not allowed. And here is the reference book room, the stacks, which are to the left of one of the main rooms. I remember wandering through these stacks as a teenager, looking for reference material for high school reports. It was always so quiet. Following the opening in 1901, the Carnegie Public Library was incredibly popular with the people in Bradford. And by 1912, it was necessary to actually renovate the inside. But that was still not enough. And in 1913, the Board of Trustees decided they had to make an annex to the library. In this map, you can see it as the yellow warehouse above the library building itself. This map is a Sanborn insurance map. And that little yellow building to the right of the Carnegie Library, there's a CONF for confectionery. That's the Herbig Bakery, where the Bradford landmark is. Of course, it was necessary to raise money to build this new annex. And even though Andrew Carnegie said he would not give any more money, he did. He gave $10,000 to help pay for the annex. It was completed in 1914. And this is a Sanborn map from 1925, which shows the annex constructed. It's now in red, which means it's made of brick. And if you were ever in the Carnegie Public Library and looked up books in the reference room, then you've been in this annex, because that's where the stacks were put in 1914. Do you remember at the beginning of this recording how I said that there were about 10,000 books in the free reading room and the school library? Well, on June 30th, 1914, after the renovations and annex had been completed, there were over 19,000 books in the Bradford Library. Of this, 14,023 were adult books, 2,700 were reference books, and 3,097 were children's books. And so the years continued. But the expansion in 1914 would prove that the library would continue to grow. As the decades passed, it became apparent that more room was needed, and as early as the 1970s, the Library Trustee Board began to look for a new location for a new library. Some of the locations considered were on Davis Street behind the Holly Hotel, on William Street, on Campus Drive, and the old post office on East Gordon Street. In October of 1986, the name Carnegie Library was changed to the Bradford Area Public Library. In 1991, a new modern library opened on West Washington Street, and the old Carnegie Public Library was closed. It would remain closed until 1993, when a restaurant opened here called, appropriately enough, Carnegie's. The building turns 120 years old this year. So the next time you drive by the corner of Congress and East Cordon, stop and take a look. And remember, this building was a library, but it had its own amazing story to tell.